Hello and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Aussie writers and other creatives.
Hello, and I'm Lynne. I'm a journalist and a content writer as well, and Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we're bringing you all kinds of tips, ideas, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
Hi Lynne, hi everybody, great to be back this week.
Now, hi Rach, it's great to be back. Yes, it's really nice. I'm so excited about our guest today as well. I love it when we have successful freelancers on the pod, because I think it shows there are so many ways to make a living as a writer too.
Absolutely. It's been a while since we've kind of gone back into this series, and anyone who's listening and might be new to the podcast, we often interview successful freelancers about their business and how they do things, and it's a really interesting one. So if you scroll back through our previous episodes, you'll see that we've got quite a few of them, haven't we, Lynne?
We do. It's inspiring, I find.
Yeah, it's great. And today we are chatting to someone that we both know, Lucy Cousins. I've known Lucy for a long time, since my magazine days. I don't know about you, Lynne, probably the same thing, because Lucy was in magazines when we both met her. Yeah. But today we're going to drill down a little bit more into her experience as a freelancer and a writer. And I'm just going to share a little bio before we get Lucy in the hot seat. Lucy E. Cousins is one of Australia's most established health, wellness and lifestyle content specialists. With over 20 years experience in content creation, she's worked on 3 continents, edited 6 national magazines, compiled 5 travel books, written hundreds of lifestyle articles and blogs for newspapers, magazines and brands, curated large-scale health conferences, and hosted wellness and travel events in Australia and overseas. She's also appeared in newspapers, on TV and radio, in blogs, and spoken in podcasts like this one. Oh my God, Lucy, every time I read someone's bio, I think, who are these accomplished people out there who managed to fit all this stuff in? That's amazing.
Wow.
Welcome.
Great to have you join us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's funny when you hear your bio read out, because you think, really?
It is.
That, like, I'm just sitting at home and like talking to a computer. Is that what that knows things?
Yes.
It is weird, isn't it? But it shows you've just done so much, and so much I didn't know. Like, I know you sort of as an editor and as a freelancer, more as an editor because you were my editor on different publications. But that's amazing. You've done so much.
I think like the looking back on it now, I didn't study journalism. So I think when I look back on all that, I think, gosh, it is lucky I've kind of fallen into this, because it wasn't the original idea.
Yeah, I didn't study journalism either. I did English literature, but knew I wanted to be a journalist. So I worked on the newspapers at uni, and I worked at the radio station, and I started pitching when I was still at uni. So I worked my way into it a different way as well.
There's no one way to make it through.
No, that's
really
right.
That's exciting. Well, I did a cadetship.
Oh, that's right. Of course. I forgot
on
that.
a newspaper back in the day when they still used to do them. Yeah. So it's all different ways to get in. So tell us about yourself, Lucy, because I know you've been freelancing on and off for years. You've done a few in-house gigs and stuff. So how did you start, and who are you writing for at the moment?
I feel like I need to condense that story, because it's a bit of I'll tell the highlights very, very quickly, only because it kind of makes sense in the long run. So I studied archaeology and Spanish.
Wow.
But like you, Rachel, I worked on the school newspaper, and I did, reviews at the local, music mag in return for CDs. And I think it was one of the early days where, it was my mother actually said to me, and she always rolls her eyes when I say this, but she did say to me at one point, it's going to be hard to make money as a writer. And so ironically, I thought, well, archaeology, that's the way to go. But part of my archaeology degree, and something I really credit it with, is it taught me like the art of critical thought. So very briefly, we would be given, a site, and we'd be given the evidence, and we'd be given an archaeological site, and we'd be given what the historians thought happened at that site. But we had to come into it like a journalist does, with no idea, looking at the data and thinking, well, do I agree with this? This is what people are saying, but do I agree? And I think that's really helped me throughout my career. But long story short, I I actually worked as a travel agent for a few years, which is important. I went to work at my first job in newspapers, which was in Bolivia.
Wow.
In South America. And it was on a newspaper called the Llama Express, and it was as ridiculous as that name was. Very fun, very, very fun. And I met a fellow journalist there who will come back into the picture. And I went traveling for about 9 months afterwards. And when I was in the heat in the middle of the jungle in Manaus in Brazil, I emailed my all-time absolute favorite magazine, which was Condé Nast Traveller in the UK. And I said to the generic email, which everyone listening will know, you think it just goes into a void that no one will ever see. And I said, hi, my name is Lucy. I've got minimal experience writing. I've been a travel agent. I would love to see if you had any entry-level jobs. Alternatively, I'd love to intern or make you coffee. Thank you for listening. And then on my way, I went up to Trinidad and Tobago. I went in and out of reception, didn't think about anything else until I got to the UK, checked my email, and there was an email from the editor. And she said, actually, we have an editorial assistant, an assistant to the editor, editorial assistant role coming up. And we need someone to book all the travel for our writers. So a job that I thought was a fill-in, which is the travel agent job, actually got me the job at my first ever magazine, which I adored, which I just think is such a sliding doors moment, because I loved to travel, and I was umming and ahhing about being a travel agent because it wasn't my passion. And then that's the thing that got me in later. Had I not had that travel agent experience, I wouldn't have got that job.
Oh, that's a fantastic story.
Yeah,
I love
that
it.
story.
I Condé Nast for a couple of years. I learned 1,001 things. But as you are when you're kind of in a big publishing house and you're very, very entry level, I felt like I wanted to do more than write the occasional tiny piece and take photocopies of emails, which my editor needed me to do in those days, because it was very early days of emails. And so I was talking to the journalist I met in Bolivia, and we decided to start our own English newspaper in Argentina, as you do, as two 26-year-olds. Within a couple of weeks, we decided to do that. We had a designer on board. We'd met the people at the Argentine embassy, and we did a fundraiser, mainly with freebies that I got from the magazine. And we went to Buenos Aires and started an English newspaper. We had a circulation of 10,000, and it was a street newspaper. So it wasn't, we funded it with advertising. Long story short, I was only there for a year. I sold my part, and that taught me a lot about either working with friends and working in business, a disaster story with friendship gone wrong. But it did teach me a lot of things about how magazines and newspapers work, how to sell ads, how to, in another language, no less, how to write stories from scratch. It was a real kind of grassroots. And then when I came, I stayed in Argentina for a couple of years doing a few other things. The guidebooks came into it. I wrote for Rough Guide. I did some footprints books, full books on Argentina, and a couple of things for Lonely Planet. And I came back to Australia and I thought, well, I've got some experience, but I don't know anyone. It was a completely new environment. And so I emailed in those days, this I'm talking about 10 years ago, they still published that book of contacts. Do you remember that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
The book of magazine contacts.
The Margaret Merton or something like that. Margaret G. Yeah.
And I went through and I emailed 300, I remember the number, 300 magazines. And I was like, This is my experience. Do you have anything? And I heard back from 2. And one of them was like, thanks, but no thanks. And the other one was this wonderful man, Richard Waller, who was working on Vogue Living at the time. And he said, well, come in for some subbing. So I did some subbing for him. And in another ridiculously bullshit move, the second day of subbing, he was working on Inside Out, but the role was from Vogue Living, helping with them. He was editor of Inside Out. And I said to him, I would love to be your deputy. And he said, thank you, but I already have a deputy. Lovely to meet you. I don't know who you are, but lovely to meet you. And I kind of went back to subbing, and I got another role at Hardy Grant doing custom publishing and things like that. And then I get an email out of nowhere saying, well, Claire, my deputy is going on maternity leave. Would you like to come in for a chat? And then that started my next 10 years in magazines.
Yeah, that's when I first met you. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
Yes. And if you're not bored enough already, then
No, it's great.
Not bored at all. I have a million questions, but it's going to derail the whole podcast. So just keep going.
I'll wrap it up. But from there, I went across and I was on the launch team of Women's Fitness, where I ended up I was deputy there, and I ended up being acting editor for a year, and that was incredible fun. Yeah. And then the merger with Cleo and Dolly happened, which for those that don't know was kind of at the end of ACP, the beginning of Bauer, trying to make some, power cuts to all of the brands. So they merged Dolly and Cleo, who understandably were losing sales at that time. So they merged those two, and I became editor-in-chief of that. I was the last editor of Cleo, because when that closed in 2016, I decided to go freelance. I had, I think, probably burnout after those 3 years. It was pretty.
That would have been grueling.
Yeah.
I had a team of 30. We produced 2 magazines a month, plus specials. And the team also created video content. And so it was like working on a weekly, I guess. And it was pretty intense meetings I was having to go to about our numbers and our sales and everything like that. And I think freelancing just offered me this freedom. I was just so excited that I didn't have to spend a whole day in an office. I could sit in my apartment with the sun streaming in, and I could spoon my dog while I was reading my emails. It's just kind of like, I like this kind of like, moment where I thought, wow, could that be my life? Could I really be a freelancer? And so when Cleo all folded and we did all of the kind of publicity for it and everything, and that all died away, I did 2 things. I started a health and wellness website called Urban Sweat, which is still kind of ticking on, when that gave me a place to really put my creativity. And then I started with freelancing.
Wow. That's a career journey. And so have you kept up the Spanish? Do you still write for overseas publications, or not so much?
So no, my first husband was Argentine. I moved in with him. So our relationship was in English first and then Spanish once we kind of got a bit more serious, I guess. But no, once I kind of moved here, I can still understand it. I still watch movies, in it, and I still love hearing, especially an Argentine accent, but I haven't done classes for a little while. It is something I'd like to do. I'd like to keep that up, because it was so fun living in another language. So fun.
Yeah. I remember bumping into you in the halls when it was ACP Bauer, and kind of right at the end, and it was just such a sad time. It was really felt so much like the end of an era for so many of us. Like, I wrote for Cleo as well, and I wrote for Women's Fitness when you were doing Women's Fitness, and those years were just epic fun. Like, as you say, way more work for you than me as your freelancer, but I just remember those years with such fondness, I have to say.
Yeah, it was a really fun time, and I wouldn't give any of that up for a start. And I knew that the Cleo move was controversial, and I knew that it was going to be super hard work, but I think I understood kind of intellectually that for my career to have some longevity, that role would really help. And at the time it seemed more important than it really was. But for the kind of starting out in the freelance world and kind of, I guess, placing myself on a, imaginary map of people that can write and edit, it was a really important move for me, career-wise, that I think later on people could look at and go, oh, well, if she's done that, she should be okay doing this. I guess it was that kind of got past that first barrier where people look at the CV and go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, if she's managed to, carry that or do this, she should be okay for this. But interestingly now, especially, and I know we're going to talk about this, but especially since I've gone into the niche of wellness lifestyle or wellness health, I usually talk about my job at Marie Claire, which was a wellness editor, and that tends to ground people more than anything else I've done, so they look and think, okay, well, if you've worked at Marie Claire, which is obviously highly accoladed and it's highly respected,
and international masthead is always impressive. I have the same, because working at Vogue, which I did, everyone knows those, and all over the world, of course, too, and Condé Nast Traveller too.
Although that's so far in my past, I'm like, hello. But no, it's interesting just now how I really kind of it's interesting how those touch points in your career change a You think at the time it's really important that you've done one thing, and it perhaps is important for that time. But I think it's really important to also realize what's relevant now. And I think for my career now, the Marie Claire, and then just recently the New York Times Tea magazine, they're the things that are relevant. And Clio is, I deal with digital editors who've never heard of Clio now because they're like 22. So it's not the thing that I can sell myself on.
So is health and wellness still your sort of main niche, or are you branching out a bit?
No, it's something that I keep falling back into, and I think it's because I found a real love of it working on women's fitness, and then also working on health agenda. And I did a stint just recently, a couple of years ago, on women's health as deputy. I feel quite passionate about the fact that there is a lack of evidence-based health and wellness ideas out there, especially everything that came through the pandemic. There's a real mismatch of knowledge that people have where they're like, gluten-free is healthy, isn't it? And it's like, well, all the gluten-free products have extra salt and sugar in them. So depending what you're eating, yes, and also no, I think and I find that sometimes content online is produced so quickly that stats and research is just grabbed from other sites without kind of the proper fact checking. And a lot of that is resources. I fully, admit to that. But I think there's some dangerous precedents that's setting there. So I think because I have that passion of, I do want evidence-based to really be at the root of what I do, I find that that's where I gravitate to. But I do, I did, as I said, take the New York Times job because it's a wonderful masthead and love the team. So I took that, and that wasn't health. And it was a nice little break for a year there. But I do keep falling back into health and fitness. Yeah.
But I think it's great to have that sort of background where you understand, you've got the experience perhaps, and when you've been doing it for a while, to see through all the sources and get some reputable things, because people do, and I think this is more common, as you say, with people who are lacking resources, but maybe lacking that. There's nowhere near as many checks and balances that there used to be. So before, as a young writer, you might have written a story and some older editor or more experienced editor would look at it and say, but where does this come from? And, but now often it just goes through from somebody who's quite inexperienced straight onto the web.
That's
absolutely
true.
And the last magazine I worked on where the fact checkers were the best in the world, was when I was back at Clio and also Australian Fitness, Women's Fitness. They would really hone down on things that you think, oh gosh, they're being a bit pedantic, but pedantic subs are what make amazing publications. Since working in a couple of other big mastheads, which I've done recently, a lot of it is, the subs are under so much, if there are subs, they're under so much pressure. There's such content coming through. And I just feel like as you say, Lynne, people aren't necessarily taught those things. And for me, I only really honed down that skill when I was editing the HCF magazine, a health agenda, because when my very first editorial meeting, I had to walk into a room of medical directors and stakeholders at HCF, and for every article idea, I had to present studies to back it up. And this is before the ideas were even, approved. And I had to really go through each study and say, how many people are in this study? Which university is this? How long ago was this study? Has it been refuted? All of those things, which even at Women's Fitness and Clio, I hadn't, I understood the concept of finding a study to back up your thought. That's great. But really going that one step further has changed, I guess, the way I write things now.
And made you a far more valuable editor, because you've got that pedantic side now when writers come to you, and you can zero down on the studies that they've chosen and figure out, are they worth including and why? And, like you were saying before when we were talking before the podcast, why does that study mean something, and how many people are in it, and all those things that we might not particularly think about when we're choosing a study. We might just think, oh, that sounds great, I'll put that in.
That's right. And I think when it comes to health and wellness, and probably most things, you can find a study to back up whatever point of view you really want to take.
Yeah. Yes, it's so true.
It's the truth. So, it's one of those kind of health and wellness studies are in abundance, and a lot are funded by perhaps companies that produce the products that the study is about. And, it's really interesting to kind of take that next level down and see who did that study. What does it say?
Yeah,
it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it?
I will say that having that evidence based on my website, so my Remedy content website, which is where I house kind of all the services that I offer, I do pinpoint that it is evidence-based, science-led. And I think I have got quite a few inquiries from people and jobs from people because of that.
That is, so it's like a sub niche of the niche. That's your point of difference, because there is a lot of people out there. Wellness is a big area and maybe a lot of potential, but also there's a lot of, well, like anything, a lot of charlatans out there. So it's important to have that differentiation.
Well, I added in health onto my website because when I first went freelance, this is how fast things change. In 2016, wellness was everything. It was everywhere. Everyone is excited about it. Now, and maybe this is just what I'm saying, wellness is seen as a little bit of a joke. You've got Goop on one side with their interesting recommendations, and you have a whole lot of influencers that are sprouting information that is not based on anything. They call themselves wellness, and I've got absolutely nothing against influencers unless you're giving out medical advice. And I think that it's not seen as taken seriously anymore. So that's why I did add health into there, because, I don't actually write for medical journals. It's not that kind of health writing, but I think some of the things I do write probably fall better under health as opposed to wellness, the ideology, the idea of wellness.
Yeah.
So how and where do you find your clients? Do you do much marketing, or do you have a full pipeline? Do they come to you? And what sort of work is it? Like, is it editorial or commercial content? What sort of things?
Yeah, I do a mixture these days. I do a fair bit of branded content for places like news.com and a few other places like that, which I love. I actually really enjoy that, because you take your editorial integrity to a branded content article and hopefully make it valuable for the reader and the client, which is a bit more of a challenge. So I like that. I do editorials. So I do a fair bit for women's health, and I still write for Tea. I love my magazines. And then I do website writing and social media captions and pamphlets and
all the bits that we do.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you're both like that. I think versatility is really the key when it comes to making money now as a freelancer. So I try to make sure I'm always either doing a course, or, as I told you, I would like to learn about podcasting just because that's interesting. I have a personal interest in SEO and SEM, so I do my own kind of research on that, which I think informs a lot of the digital things that I write, or if I'm speaking to someone about their business and how their website is. But in answer to your question, industry news. So Rachel's List has actually got me a huge amount of jobs, and actually got me via a very different path. Actually, it helped me get Tea magazine in the end. Yeah. So that was really, Rachel's List has been invaluable to me, and I recommend it. I also follow Tellum and MediaNet. So Tellum newsletter and MediaNet are both really interesting for finding out where editors are, and I keep a little kind of note of that, and I also copy and paste it and send it to a freelancer friend that might be looking for work or that might be in that niche. I'm always sharing those kind of things. I think a lot of my work comes from referrals now. So I tend to, because I've been in the industry for so long, and I know this is an annoying tip for people that are starting out because, it's not really relevant, but I guess the point is a lot of the referrals come from people I've worked with in the past that have thought for whatever reason I was good enough. And so they keep me in their mind because they think, oh, she's a health and wellness. Because a lot of times, if you're an editor, you just want someone who's good, who'll deliver on time. And if you're taking a chance on an unknown or a chance from someone who's worked with someone, you're always going to go with the referral. I would be interested to see editors that don't, because you're under the pump and you think, okay, so you've worked with her and she's good and you recommend her. Okay, let's go with her. And I think once you get in that, freelancer world and you deliver on time and hopefully with no real grammar problems and no real
drama
writing that need to be fixed, and you understand the brief, that kind of thing, people just remember you. And I think that's where the niche comes in, because you can be a writer that does everything, which is great, but if you're a writer that has a slight niche or even an interest, then people tend to remember that.
I definitely agree with you there. Like, I think a lot of my work, probably the bulk of my work, comes from referrals or people that know me before. But I'm finding, and this will be a good tip for people who are listening who are starting out, a lot of my new work and new leads is coming from Google and my Google My Business. And people will just literally see me on there and pick up the phone. And I'll have 2 or 3 calls a week. And most of those I put to Rachel's list because it's either not my area or I don't have time to do them. So they're just straight on as a job. Yeah.
That's interesting. And also because it took me a long time to pull Remedy content together. But interestingly, as soon as I did, all my jobs just kind of doubled. And I think it's because a lot of time people really just want to land on somewhere that has all the information that they can just double check that, that all the details about you and that you're legitimate and that, you've got a good looking website and it's everything's spelt right.
You've worked at the right places and you've got the right sort of experience.
Exactly. And without a website, honestly, like I set my website up a few years ago and it's got pretty good SEO. I mean, I don't do a lot on it. I should do more. It's Wix, so that they do quite a good, SEO kind of bounce. But I think, like, if I was starting out as a freelancer today, my very first thing would be to get myself a website straight up. And I still don't understand people that haven't done that.
No, and a lot of them haven't. That's what we talk about a lot at Rachel's List. 2 of the jobs that we had on, I won't tell you which ones, but went on in the last week, were guys that came via Google and saw my website. And it's fairly new and quite zhuzhy because I had my friend do the banners and she's amazing. But I built the whole thing myself. And both of them were like, no, you have to do it. We've already seen your website and want you to do it. And, I just thought the power of a good, like, beautifully, website. Thought out website, it has so much power when you think about it. And I can't understand people who don't have one either, but I come across them all the time.
Through Instagram, you can have, there's that app Milkshake, where you make up a very small website that you can kind of access through your bio. And it's like the very least you could do. At least have your Instagram as a professional Instagram and post about what your niche is or what you love, or put your work up there. Like, as an editor, I don't care if you've got 10 followers. That doesn't bother me. It just gives me somewhere to land on, to place you in a context so that I can work out if I think you can handle what I need getting done. Or if I've got an email from you with a pitch, then I can be like, okay, let me have a look at somewhere.
What can this person do? That's a really interesting one from the perspective of an editor. Like, if you get a pitch from someone who hasn't got a website, they're very unlikely to be commissioned. Do you think?
No, but I think that it makes my job so much faster and easier. If I look on a website and it's looking up to date, and I looked on a freelancer's website the other day. This is when I was still working at Tay, and all the examples on there were from 2018. And that's also a red flag. And I appreciate that someone might not have done work since 2018. However, you could always write something free for your local newspaper, or you can, there's
do a blog post.
We can exactly have a blog post on there that shows me something. I feel like it legitimizes you, and I don't know if that's right or wrong, but as an editor, it's somewhere that I can just do a quick check and like, yep, they look like they know what they're doing. Let's go for it.
Yeah, I agree. Often a lot of my clients too are actually looking on behalf of somebody. So if there's a marketing manager or a marketing coordinator or a content manager, they often want to say, oh, I think this person is going to be good. Here's her website. So it gives them legitimacy to say, I chose this person for a reason. And I think that's also good.
And it takes that pressure point away from you as a freelancer to try and really sell yourself in that article. In that pitch. Like, if you can say, look, I'm a freelancer. This is who I've written for. Here's my website. I've put 2 pictures below. Would love to hear from you. You don't have to have a paragraph of like, oh, I have a dog and I do this. You don't have to sell yourself, because a lot of freelancers, understandably, aren't great at like shouting from the hilltops, apart from the fact that we're Australians and we find that generally pretty hard. I think it is hard when you're sort of sitting at home on your desk and you're probably wearing your PJs and you've got a cold coffee and you're trying to, write your award-winning bio in a pitch email. And it's just depressing sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about contacts and contact books. I know that you've got an amazing one, obviously, after so many years in the business. So Tell us about how you develop relationships with people who are bringing you work and giving you work. And do you feel that that relationship building makes a difference and it's really important?
Yes, I think in this industry, especially as freelancers tend to work in silos, or you might go into an office for a stint, but again, you're working in your own kind of silo. I just think that any kind of touch point you have with people is just really lovely. From a personal point of view, so you feel less alone, so you know who's on the other end of that email and you have some banter here or there, but also so that you can, as a freelancer, and look, apologies to all of the PRs that I work with, but I will email them at 9 a.m. and say, I need to do an interview with this, some kind of expert that is like this. Have you got anyone? I need to talk to them today. And then they'll be running around for me, and it helps them out, it helps me out, but I have to appreciate that they're doing that for me. And they're not going to do it for me if they don't know who I am, if I haven't had a chat to them or a coffee here or there. It's really that relationship building for me that has worked out. But it's interesting you're saying, Rachel, the contacts, because I take that question in too, because I have that niche of health. I consider my contacts of experts actually more important to me than my contacts of work. I know that if I get an article where I have to interview 2 psychologists, a child pediatrician, a pediatrician, or a exercise physiologist, I know exactly who those people are. Or if not, I know where to find them. And I think a lot of people, they feel relieved. A lot of editors who are like, oh, can you interview 3 experts? Is that okay? Do you want me to get some emails for you? Do you want to get some names? It's like, no, that's fine. I've got my go-tos. Or, and I think building up that contacts book, and that doesn't, you can do that if you're not in health. You have your own,
I have mine in
mine is huge.
Design and architecture, and yours is huge in different ones.
We've got like a source tracker at Rachel's List, which kind of gives you all, you can put them all in there and then you can search it. It's like an Excel spreadsheet that we had designed. And so I used to use that, but I've actually just started using this thing called Folk app, FOLK app.
You've been raving about this all week, haven't you?
I have to just mention it again because it's so cool. It's like an online CRM, like a cloud CRM, but it's also got a Chrome thing so that if you're talking to an expert on LinkedIn, or what I try and do with all my stories now is I link to those experts and I, follow them everywhere. And then when the story comes out, I'm like, thank you so much for this. And then they share it and they, hear of you, and then those relationships build. But anyway, if you're going onto LinkedIn and talking to someone on there, you can click this little thing and it finds the person's details on LinkedIn that you're talking to or the page that they're on, and it chucks it in your CRM for you. And then you can categorize it. And it's just a game changer, like for creating all those, expert files and audiences and things like that. And like you say, Lucy, as a I don't do heaps of health now, but when I did, you needed that list of all those experts, people that you could just ring at a moment's notice and get an interview. Absolutely.
Especially because not everyone is media trained, or even especially media trained, just someone that's happy to give you a sound bite, and I think
media savvy.
Savvy. Yeah.
And I kind of just feel like at the moment, with the experts that I have, I tend to do a 10-minute interview, short, sharp, like 5-6 questions, and I can get what I need for most articles, unless they're super intense or like very long, or the questions very convoluted. I just think 10 minutes on the phone, let's do this. And they're all so great. They give you exactly what you need. And that kind of comes into, for me, how I charge, how long my articles take. I know that I'm not on the phone for like 40 minutes trying to get 2 quotes for an article that's 800 words.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get to know who those people are that are going to give you what you need quickly. But that's taken years to get to that point, to get those media savvy experts in your file and know that you can call on them and have that relationship where they'll pick up the phone or send you a quick email or whatever.
For me, it's more taken years for me to know how to do that interview technique. I remember when I first started out and I was just too scared to call anyone. I just sent email interviews off to everyone. This is when I first started in magazines, and I was so nervous about interviews. It took me such a long time to realize that by speaking to someone on the phone for 10 or 15 minutes, your job is so much easier. Because for me, I kind of work out the structure of my article as they're talking. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, then I'll probably need a quote then to back up that. And I kind of ask them. And once I get the transcript, like the job's half done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's an email interview, which a lot of people do, a lot of freelancers do that because it is easier at the beginning. I don't know about you guys, but I just find that like I then have to write the article to fit the quotes. So I'm like,
Yes.
oh, they only answered half of that article. All right, well, why don't I write an intro here? And it makes my job harder.
Yeah.
I also find it's less sort of spontaneous too, because often when you get email interviews, I do find sometimes people give you sort of stock standard responses that they may have given to every other journalist who's ever rung them or every other writer. And sometimes you end up inadvertently plagiarizing somebody because they're giving the same answers to everything, or they use the same things. Whereas if you're actually chatting to them, you can maneuver it around so you get fresh content and fresh perspectives, and you can challenge some of those perceptions, which you never can in emails.
Also, you can get ideas for other stories that you can pitch as well. So there's so much gold in picking up the phone that you don't get from an email interview. I'm not saying I never do email interviews, of course I do, but I do think picking up the phone can give you so much more and such better quotes 90% of the time.
Yeah, I don't really like email interviews, except unless it's sort of highly technical or really specialized, where I'm concerned that I might misinterpret something. Yeah.
So going back to your question before about contacts, I do think, and I felt pretty passionate about this for a while, I think that PRs aren't given their due credit. I know they can be annoying because they email you 5 times and you're like, I can't do anything with that data about Kit Kats, but they are like, they have their job. But honestly, like we can't do ours without theirs, and they can't do theirs without ours. So it's, you know, I think really they for a lot of years now, I just really appreciate the PRs I work with. Hopefully they feel that, but like I really do, because they make my life so much easier.
I actually agree with you. I meant to bring that up when you mentioned it before. They get a really bad rap, don't they? But I try to say, you know, I have so many PRs as well who really try and send me good stories, and if I know them well, I'll say, look, I'm sorry I can't place this right now, but you know, I'll just keep it in my features file for the future or something like that. And it does build those relationships, and then they're on you the minute that they can help you, and they can help you, like you say, in hours, you know, when you're really desperate and under the pump. So yeah, I agree with you. Those relationships are just as important as the experts that you interview and your editors and your clients and other freelancers and all of that. So yeah, we love you PRs if you're listening.
Well, I've been dealing with them all week because I'm doing a huge piece for Home Beautiful, and they all want lots of images, product images. And so when you're dealing with a PR, they understand the right format. If I'm dealing straight with a company, I've got to explain that it's high res, it has to be deep etched, and I often have 2 or 3 emails getting the right sort of material or the right sort of assets. Whereas with a PR, they just send it over in a Dropbox folder and it's all done with the correct information. That saves me hours. It really does. Yeah. So tell me, I wanted to ask you, so why is your byline always Lucy E. Cousins? I think there's a good story there, isn't there?
Yes, it looks really pretentious, but there's actually a children's book. Any parents out there would know this, but there's a children's book author called Lucy Cousins, exactly the same name as me. And I found it when I was doing my book for Footprints, because I Googled myself. I'm going to say it. I'll admit to it. But when my book
it's a good practice. You never know.
When my book was released, I was like, who is this Macy lady? And then I realized that it's probably good for my career if I kind of differentiated myself a little bit, even just what we were talking about before, when people land on a page somewhere, you know, they Google you want yourself to come up. Obviously you don't want someone else. So
you don't want the children's book author to come up all the time.
Yeah. And it's funny, now that I've got kids, there's been a few, one child, I do have a dog, I call her my child too. But when I go to some children's events, you'll see the educator or the person come up and go, oh, are you the Macy's book writer? I have to say, no, absolutely not. He is more talented and more rich than I will ever be. But I think that's just part of that whole, how do I stand out? Like there are lots and lots of writers out there. But the funny thing is, with my editor hat on, I have to say there's not a huge amount of people out there that can do the real basics. There's a lot of great writers out there, but the real basics, and we touched on it before, but it is understanding a brief or asking questions if it's a terrible brief, which I've been given as as a writer, and hopefully don't give as an editor. Meet the deadline. If you're not going to meet the deadline, stuff happens, like that's fine. Give ample notice. If you can't give ample notice, then at least email on the day it's due and explain when it will come in, why, and when it's late, just so that the editor has some concept of that. And then my personal bugbear is grammar. And I started off being terrible at grammar, and I did one of those Sydney Writers Centre grammar courses. And I think that's a real key. If you want to be good in this game, don't learn how to do grammar. I know successful writers, freelance writers that have terrible grammar. I just think, learn how to put the full stop in. So that's my personal bugbear. But so as an editor, I think if you hit all of those, you will always have work. You really will, because it's interesting how many people either working too fast and they don't get that done, or they don't think it's important because they think that's what the editor does,
or the sub,
if they exist anymore. But editors are so busy, as you guys know, that if you make something really easy for someone, they will commission you again.
What do you, I mean, I know you as an editor, but what do you prefer? Do you prefer being an editor on that side, or do you prefer freelancing?
I really love being an editor, and that's where I always kind of gravitated. But I have to say, it depends on the stage in my life. So being an editor is wonderful if you can go all in, live it, breathe it. Come up with thousands of ideas, and hopefully you have the responsibility, or someone's given you the responsibility to implement what you want to do, and you can have bigger reaching ideas. But that's only if you've got that time/energy to do that. Whereas at times when I'm freelancing, so at the moment I've just finished up with tea. I was doing that part-time, 2.5 days. Now I'm doing just freelance. I'm actually I'm just about to start teaching at Sydney Uni in their media department, but I'm really looking forward to just doing some freelance, which means I can send the article off, press send. I might have to make a change or two, but that's where my responsibilities finish. Whereas, if you're working in-house, or if you're working on a magazine, you've got to if you're editing, that's one bit, but then your job extends to all these other calculable, like how are things working, all the data, you're getting the hits,
budgets,
selling the mags, and you have to be in the right frame for that, and the right frame of mind. And for me at the moment, I'm really excited about all these little projects that come up in terms of these little articles or this website, or what am I doing now? It's always so different, and I love that part of freelancing. I love that in the morning I can be writing about a health article to do with vitamins, and in the afternoon I can be interviewing someone. It's interesting.
And you've got a 3-year-old, I know, so I remember that stage, because I've got a nearly 8-year-old now, and when I had the 2-3-year-old, and I was at the library all the time and looking at Lucy Cousins' books and thinking, is that my editor moonlighting as a children's writer? Because I did think that all the time, and I thought I must remember to ask her, and then I just forgot in that fog of sleep deprivation. But it's so true, isn't it? It's what you can do in that stage of your life, and freelancing is kind of like, a Tetris game of fitting the pieces around, the parts of your life that are immovable, like 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds, or whatever else you're navigating. And being an editor, like you say, you have to be all in. And
when I first went as a freelance, I did need to take a break after working full-time for a long time with all the stress. But also at that time, I had a dog. I was told that she had 3 months to live. She actually ended up living 4 years longer.
Wow.
But it was one of those things where I thought, well, I can work around that. And that's the beauty of freelancing. And, you can work, especially some creatives find that they are, night owls or early morning, and you don't necessarily fit into that parameter of 9 to 5, put your head down, put your earphones in, get it done. Like, I tend to be better if it's 10 o'clock at night and I have a deadline. I tend to be much better at doing it at that point than trying to spend an entire day where the pressure's not on me and I don't have my juices flowing and that kind of stuff. And so I can do other things. I can do research or invoicing then, or I can go do a yoga class.
Exactly.
Do you have a daily or a weekly routine? No, talk us through. No. What happens in your usual week?
So my daughter's in daycare 3 days a week, but I tend to, most of the deadlines for me, I don't know why, but they tend to fall later in the week. So the first couple of days I set up a lot of interviews. I send them off to be transcribed, and then forget about them until about 2 hours before the deadline. I do a lot of invoicing and admin, that kind of stuff, but really no week is the same. And I love that. I actually love that. that annoys some people. I completely understand that. And I also know a lot of people hate pitching. I love pitching. I don't care if someone says no, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. Like, it's just having those brainstorming sessions. And so someone recently asked me to send through some ideas, and that whole idea of sending through like 8 ideas, here you go. Because I really love condensing ideas to a really snappy title and a very short 2-line explanation. And then if someone wants more info, they can do it. But it takes a lot of, I guess, experience. For me, it took a lot of experience to be okay with sending those ideas off and them all getting rejected. Like, that doesn't bother me in the slightest now. But when you're first starting out, it's pretty hard.
You take it personally, don't you? Yes.
I think what bothers me and what bothers so many people now is, especially if you're a senior journo, not getting a response at all, even from editors that you know. And I suppose that comes down to they've got 400 emails in their inbox, and then the next day there's another 400. So I just wanted to talk to you about rates and setting rates. Are you still at the mercy of word rates when you're doing journalism stuff, or do you try and set your rates a bit now? And how do you do it with the other work and the other clients that you work for?
For most magazine and print, I think we're all still going off just the word rates, right? Because they've got their tight budgets, and most people are exactly the same. Most companies are the same in what they charge. Although I have to say, I have worked with a couple of freelancers who have challenged, when I've been an editor, who have challenged the word rate. And depending on who they are, the idea, the timeline, I've been happy to go back and look at the budgets and change that. So I don't think people should be scared if they think they should be charged more. I mean, you can always try your luck, that's what I think. But for the stuff that comes through Remedy content or the branded content, it tends to be a flat rate. And if I charge it, I generally charge by the hour. I'm pretty quick these days, I guess, especially with health and wellness, because health articles tend to have a bit of a similar structure. So I tend to look at, if I was doing this, how long would this take? How much am I happy to get? And sometimes it ends up being pretty reasonable for the client, because I don't think I'm going to take very long. And I never know if that's the right thing. You know, everyone charges in different rates. But for me, I think, okay, how much of my actual life is this going to take? How much would I be happy with? And I have my set hourly rate, and I think, okay, does that work? Does that not? But then, you know, with there's a few repeat clients that I'll, you know, either charge a bit more if it's a much more in-depth project and you're project managing, which I know, Lynne, you do a lot of.
I do.
Project managing, or if it's something that I know will take absolutely no time at all, then I will just charge a very nominal fee.
I think it's important to talk about that, because you are efficient and you're doing well, and you shouldn't be punished for that. That's why people come to you. So if you happen to get something done in 2 hours that might take somebody 5, that's not I think that's a bonus. That's why people get you.
It's come up a lot, hasn't it, on the podcast? Because when you do get quicker, and you're charging less because you get quicker, that means you're being penalized because you're quicker and more efficient, you know.
But I mean, it can also work the other way. Like, so companies might say, look, we've got, you know, other freelancers have quoted $500, and you think, okay, that's fine, knowing that it'll only take you an hour, and you're like, ooh,
yeah,
so
exactly.
It does go both ways. But I feel like the pay structure is so hard when you're a freelance writer, because the variables are so just out there. You know, every project is literally dependent on the person that's doing it, your experience, if the client's going to be painful, if the editor's going to be painful, if finding like case studies can be really annoying. Like someone that wants to share their house on a Vogue living shoot, like it really, the parameters change so much. And I think in those early days where all the magazines were closing and there were a lot more of us freelancers trying to make a living, I think there was this feeling that if you're undercharging, you're doing everyone else a disservice. You know, all the other freelancers, like, you're not being part of the team. We all need to get together and charge the same rates. But I think that's unrealistic. Not all tradies charge the same rates. Not all businesses pay the same salary. I think when it comes down to it, and it is harder when you're first starting out, but when it comes down to it, you need to work out how much do you need to run your household, pay your bills, how much extra do you need in order to pay your tax, but also feel like you're being respected in that work. And I find time and time again, when I undercut myself, which I do, which is, because I come up with numbers and then I think, what did I say that for?
Yeah.
I don't look forward to that work. It's not my best work, and I never want to work with the client again. And that's not the client's fault at all. It's that I've undercharged.
Yeah.
You can end up feeling quite resentful.
You
it's really
can.
frustrating.
That's why I always want to just step away and say, I'll get back to you, and really, really work it out if you're not sure, and figure it out, like take the time to figure out, is this really going to take me 6 hours, or is it more going to be 16? And is this client, a nightmare? Do I need to add a 20%, pain in the ass buffer and all of that sort of stuff, Yeah. But you need to kind of take time to think about all those things. Yeah.
So one of the questions we often ask all our guests is about digital tools and little tips and things. I wondered if you had any that you find really essential or really help you be more efficient or do your job better. You said you use transcribing. Where do you send that?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people, I just use Rev and Otter. I think transcribing is one of those fantastic things that I spend a lot of money on, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a great answer for that. I think I use the real basics, honestly. I know that Rachel's List has great spreadsheets that you can download, and you really help with that side of things, which I think is important. Like I've got a spreadsheet which my engineer, Excel loving husband has created for me, which does things automatically that I have no idea. It's amazing. So I think having a really up-to-date spreadsheet that is saved to the cloud constantly, like just updated the whole time with your invoices, how much tax is coming out of each fee, when you sent off the invoice, when you were paid, all that kind of thing is just so important. And then I have another sheet, another digital file, which is my upcoming work, which just has everything in order of when I should be working on things. Obvious things like that are really helpful. And when it comes to social media, I just use a couple of I swap a lot, in terms of Plan and Planaply and a few kind of apps like that.
Well,
fine.
Sometimes old school is the best. Simple stuff is the best. But unfortunately, I'm just like a slave to everything new that comes along. And I'm like, oh, new shiny thing. Better try that out.
You can tell us exactly what's good or bad. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk to you all day, but we have basically gone very far
over time. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you one more question. People that are listening who might be starting out or might be fairly new, I mean, what would you recommend to those people to kind of, give their biz a push and start to get, regular work and all of that sort of thing? I
think they need to understand that they are their own marketing department. A lot of it is marketing. So you have, right, you get to be a better writer the more you write. So the most obvious thing is to have a blog if you can, or if you're interested. That just constant writing really helps you practice. It also is somewhere that an editor can land on. But then with that marketing head, you need to look at what your social footprint is. If your Instagram photos are not representative of who you want to be professionally, change the name of it and make sure your Instagram or anything that's visible, your LinkedIn or your website, projects where you want to be, not necessarily where you are now, where you want to be. I mean, I think like that whole idea of just jumping in, like really early on, I got a question years and years ago about whether I write media packs. And I was like, yep, absolutely, definitely. And then I was Googling what's in a media pack the very next day. I used a great template that was on Microsoft, and the client absolutely loved it. And there's no reason I can't write a media pack just because I didn't know the structure. So I think jumping in with things is, with your eyes open, but jump in. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you can work out how to do it. It's fine. I think keeping contacts up to date, getting in touch with those PRs and having coffee, and if you don't know who they are, like look on places like, ask on places like Rachel's List or go to some industry events, that kind of thing, find out who you need to be talking to. And then, be business minded. It's what we were talking about before. You are a business. You might be a creative at heart, but if you want to be a freelancer, you have to be a business. Otherwise, you'll find that at the end of the year, you spent all your money on transcripts, you're charging too low, and unfortunately, your computer's about to burst, but you don't have the $4,000 to buy a new one. It has to be a business. Otherwise, it's a hobby.
Love that.
Great advice.
Great advice.
Thank you, Lucy. It's been so good listening to you and chatting with you today. It's really good. I think it'll give people a lot of inspiration and some great ideas that you've done. I love hearing your story. It was great. Absolutely.
Tell us where people can track you down and stalk you in a nice way.
remedycontent.com.au or just my Instagram, which is Lucy E. Cousins. You can come and stay at my Airbnb in the mountains.
Nice.
Okay, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, well, add all those links. That'd be great.
No, thank you so much. It's not often that you kind of get to sit down and think, all right, so do I have some advice for people? What could I tell? It's fun. It's fun to chat about your career as a freelancer because, as we said, we all work in such silos, but our situations are also similar, that it's nice to connect.
Absolutely.
Yep, sure.
And hopefully we'll see you in the flesh at the Christmas party.
Oh,
yes.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, thank you everybody for listening. That brings us to the end of the show this week, but we'll be back, I think, next week, won't we, Lynn?
We will.
We will. Maybe with another guest.
Yes.
Lynn knows. She keeps the calendar.
Yes. Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lucy. Bye.